Hello, nature fans. I'm Don Kloss for Central Ohio Nature. Welcome to our first recorded program. And today we are going to talk about something that involves a little thing called phrenology. You may or may not have heard of this term before. If you have, great. If not, we are going to discuss it as we take a look at what happened with certain creatures that I follow in my nature journaling throughout the summer. So for you today, we have a summer roundup. Stay tuned. As I mentioned at the beginning of our program, this is a summer roundup, and this is related to creatures and things that I track here locally around my neighborhood through the use of my 5-year nature journal. It is something that I have been doing for about 4 years now. And this is something that is called phrenology. And phrenology is simply the study of nature, study of nature, plants and animals and creatures through when they are seen, when you start seeing them during a season, when you stop seeing them, their migration patterns, things like that. For example, butterflies. When you first start seeing different species, when you begin to see their caterpillars, when you start to see them creating their chrysalis and so on. So things along those lines, simply recording the dates and noticing changes from year to year. So the first thing we're going to take a look at is fireflies, something that is noticed and of interest of pretty much everyone who loves nature. Now, for me, I observed a lot more of them this year than in the previous 2 years. And it's kind of strange for whatever reason. I noticed a lot more of them in front yards than in backyards in my neighborhood. Don't know why that is, but it's definitely something that I noticed easily. And when I did some research online, I found out from an article in the Washingtonian titled, "Here's Why Fireflies Are Everywhere This Year." As it turns out, we had a warmer spring this year with a lot more rainfall than in the previous few springs. And what that did was it kind of set into motion a earlier and longer season for the fireflies. Now, the first one I recorded seeing was on June 13th. So what this warmer spring with more rainfall did, normally we see fireflies, the bulk of them anyway, for about 1 month in early summer. Instead, this year they were here from late spring through midsummer, which is not typical. However, despite that fact, the Washingtonian article stated that they are still in decline overall. And the biggest reason for that is widespread use of pesticides to control mosquitoes. So that's something that I think we all know has been happening for many, many years and continues. Next, June bugs. And I know a lot of people don't like June bugs, but as you can see from this photo, I admire them because they just have a very pretty, shiny brown color to them. It almost looks like they've got a coat of lacquer on them, and it's just a gorgeous brown color. Well, here's what happened with June bugs this year. Now, they appeared in late May and were gone by the first week of June, like they pretty much always do. However, they reappeared for about a week on July 18th, which was something I had not seen before. But this apparently is not unusual, even though I haven't seen it before. I found through research that they actually are active throughout the summer, even though we don't typically see them throughout the entire summer. And something else that I learned that's very interesting is why we always find them on our screens and windows at night. Why are they attracted to that light around our outside lighting? Why are they attracted to the lights in our houses? Scientists believe it is something they call light distinction confusion, which is a complicated way of them saying they are colorblind. And the interesting thing about this is they believe that incandescent and LED light that these insects see in and around our homes, they in their color blindness confuse that for the color green, which is associated with plants, which normally in darkness, they cannot see the color green. And they are plant eaters, so they see that light and they think there is something there to eat. So that's why they're crawling around on our windows and screens and so on, because they think there's something there to eat. And they're just mistaking the light for that. Very interesting, right? Now, next, something happened this year that happens off and on with trees called abscission. What is abscission? I'm sure you probably saw this like I did. This happens a lot in early September, though it can happen other times during the summer and early fall. Trees dropping green leaves, deciduous trees dropping green leaves. But why do they do this? Another name for this is summer leaf drop, as you see in the photo here. And this is a sign of stress. One of the major reasons that is actually the biggest reason for you to see this is a lack of rain like we have had this year, late into the summer, going into the fall here. The trees intentionally drop green leaves when there is a lack of rain, because that gives them less leaves to have to support with nutrients stored in their trunks and their roots. It's a way of conserving their nutrients. Now, there are other reasons for this. It could be a sign of disease if you see this in an individual tree. Could also be a sign of pest infestation in a single tree or in a few trees next to each other. If it's widespread, apart from lack of rain, it could also be a symptom of excessive heat. If we've had a long heat wave, that could also bring it about. And I will mention this is deciduous trees only. And to clarify this, you will see coniferous trees dropping needles at this time of year and during the summer, but that is not abscission. The coniferous trees normally drop needles during the summer. That's normally when they do it. They don't do it in the fall. They don't have needles that change color and drop in the fall like our deciduous trees do. Coniferous trees are on a different timetable. So next, moths and butterflies. Unfortunately, moths and butterflies are in trouble. I saw a lot fewer butterflies this year, and not just in my neighborhood, but everywhere. Science Daily published an article titled Dramatic Decline in Western Butterfly Populations Linked to Fall Warming. They stated in this article that there has been a 1.6% decline each year over the past 50 years in butterflies. That's an 80% total decline over the last 50 years, which is alarming because they are at the bottom of the food chain. Of course, we don't eat insects. We don't eat the creatures that eat butterflies, but those creatures do have a big effect on the ecosystems that do produce the food that we eat. Butterflies and the creatures that eat them are pollinators. That affects our crops, for example, so this is not a good thing. About the autumn warming, that causes a few different problems for the butterflies. It decreases their late in the year food sources. The autumn warming keeps their predators active for longer, for later into the year, particularly along their migration routes, which helps decimate their populations. It also causes them to wait later in the year for their hibernation preparation, which can cause them to be caught unexpectedly in frosts and killing frosts, which also decimates their numbers. So the autumn warming is a big deal. They are very particular about when they plan their migrations and the routes that they take. And the autumn warming throws all of that out of whack for them. And the food sources, activity of the predators, those are all very closely related to that. So this has, along with pesticide usage, loss of habitat, those things have a lot to do with this huge decline in their numbers. Now, as far as moths go, I again have seen a lot fewer this year. Right where I live, I am within the block I am on. There are 3 street lights that I always watch at night off and on, and I've seen a lot fewer butterflies at night hovering around those street lamps, and a lot fewer bats flying around the area preying on those. Um, I have also noticed on the camping trips that I took this summer a lot fewer moths. And there has been, over the last 10 years, depending on species, up to a 44% decline worldwide. And causes that I'm sure a lot of you have heard about: loss of habitat, climate change, urbanization, uh, which also is related to artificial light pollution, agricultural intensification, and non native species. And just to talk in a little more detail about these, um, urbanization, of course, causes artificial light pollution, uh, which is a problem for them. Um, Agricultural intensification. When you take a drive in the country or anywhere, might even be near your own city where there are agricultural fields, and you see the signs next to the farm fields uh, that say Pioneer, or something to that effect. They're just a small metal sign, and they have letters and numbers on them that looks like some type of a code. That is that's crops being grown from genetically altered seeds. And what those genetically altered seeds do is grow crops that have leaves and stems that are chemically altered from natural plants. And when creatures like moths feed on those, it causes changes within their bodies. It can cause disease or death. It can cause them to lay eggs that won't survive, or lay eggs that turn into larvae that will not survive. It's very bad for their populations. It's it is kind of related to the bottom point there, non-native species. We have non-native species of plants here, and certain ones, and this is true worldwide, certain ones, the moths will lay eggs on them. And when the eggs hatch and the larvae try to feed on those plants do not provide adequate sustenance for those larvae, and the larvae die. And that works a lot towards reducing the numbers of these creatures. That has a lot to do with the decline. It's been worse in other countries than here, but it does happen here. Now, next, these guys that were just here not too long ago and are not around right now, at least not now in my area, the seasonal cicadas. Now, the first one that I observed this year was on July 12th. Last year, I didn't see or hear the first one until July 22nd. So they were here, quite a bit earlier this year. And this year, the last one I heard was on September 14th. Last year, the last one I heard was on September 4th. So they were here for a longer period of time this year. Um, and I think it is related to a couple of things. Um, First, I think, and I don't know this for fact, but I think it might have had something to do with the drier summer. Um, because that's, several weeks there that longer that their season lasted. Um, Another thing that I think was a big contributor, I will talk about in a few minutes. So hold that thought. Now, the birds. I'm sure a lot of you remember that Hitchcock movie. I saw a change in the birds that I saw here locally compared to the last few years. First of all, in my neighborhood, this subdivision here, I observed a lot more crows, a lot more sparrow species, more catbirds, um, more house wrens. I have 5 wren-sized bird boxes, bird houses in my backyard, and 4 of the 5 actually had and still have house wrens that have taken up residence in them. And for the first time in the 4.5 years that I've lived here, there's been a lot of blue jays around in this neighborhood, where in the past they just were not here. However, in the past, there's been a lot of robins in this neighborhood. And I have seen very few robins. The ones I did see were around earlier in the spring. Once we got into about the middle of June, I stopped seeing them. Bluebirds, for the last 2, maybe 3 years, my next door neighbor and I have had, quite a few bluebirds, 4 to 6 bluebirds around pretty much all year, every year. We saw 1 or 2 of them in early spring, and that's been it. We've had a family of Cooper's hawks in the neighborhood that we used to see every day. And up until just this last week, we hadn't seen very much of them. Scarlet tanagers had been regular visitors over the last few years and didn't see them at all this year. Haven't seen any brown-headed cowbirds, which were regular visitors in the past. Now, mallards, I have seen mallards a lot in our parks, and wherever there's water, in a lot of the subdivisions that have ponds, of which there are many. But now, this particular neighborhood that I live in, even though we do not have any water features in this neighborhood, the last 2 years, we've always had mallards living in people's front yards. This year, we haven't had it. And finally, we've always had a fair amount of starlings in this neighborhood, and we really didn't have any of those this year either. And this, the birds that we've had fewer of this year, I think that has also been, at least in this neighborhood, a contributing factor for why the cicadas were around a lot longer. You got a list of birds here that are insect eaters that were not around this year to get the cicadas, as many of them. So I think that had a lot to do with why the cicadas were around for longer than they normally are. Now, tree frogs. These always interest me, just for the fact that for the last few years, we've always had them in my immediate area here, and you hear the males and females calling back and forth together. But from year to year, it sounds like the numbers never grow. So it sounds like they're calling each other and they never actually meet up. Well, there was a change this year. To look at dates, the first one I heard this year was June 13th. Last year, the first one that I heard was on May 13th. So they showed up about a month later. I'm guessing that probably had to do again with that more rainy spring. And then this year, the last one I heard was on September 17th. And last year was just a couple years later, or a couple days later, excuse me, September 19th. So it was a shorter season this year by about a month. Um, Again, I kind of attribute it to the rain, although I that's not a scientific definite. And although it was a shorter season for them this year, there were more of them. Last year, again, I could only definitely pinpoint that we had two in this immediate area, a male and a female. But this year, I heard at least six different individuals. It's kind of hard sometimes to pinpoint male and female, but we definitely had six. So something happened. Now, minnows. As a fisherman, this one is always of great interest to me. Um, this is something I notice as I am fishing, and as I do stream quality monitoring on the Big Darby for Division of Wildlife. I don't have and don't do any formal counts. It's just what I notice, what strikes my attention again as I do stream quality monitoring at the Big Darby and while I'm on fishing trips. And I noticed overall, any of the places that I was at, um, Homestead Metro Park, different places on the Big Darby, Beaver Lake, which is off of Big Darby, um, Prairie Oaks Metro Park, um, Kaiser Lake, um, which is up by Urbana, Lake Hope down in Vinton County. Wherever I was at, I saw higher quantities of minnows overall than last year. The biggest place really that I noticed higher quantities was at O'Shaughnessy Nature Preserve, which a lot of people know as Twin Lakes up in Shawnee Hills. And why I notice this and why it's important is it's an indicator of future populations. Um, the species that I could definitely identify that I saw greater quantities of than last year in these places was largemouth bass and smallmouth bass. In the Big Darby, red darters, rainbow darters, and on the Big Darby and at O'Shaughnessy, fish that which you see in this photo here are called true minnows. True minnows are a species of minnow that are just that. They do not grow into a large fish like a largemouth or smallmouth bass. Um, they are minnows that are simply a minnow species. They are a prey food for larger fish. So they're an important food source for other fish, for crayfish, um, any fish that is a carnivore, like large and smallmouth bass and catfish, um, saugeye, walleye, so on. So a lot more minnows overall, and that's a good sign. That means there's a lot more food out there for the larger fish. And when it comes to some of these species like largemouth and smallmouth bass, it means in the next few years we're going to have pretty good populations of them in the places where I saw them. Now, these characters, coyotes and brown bears, where I see, from everything that I look at daily on the next door social media platform, every day more and more sightings in the Hilliard, Dublin, Upper Arlington general area, coyote sightings and coy wolf sightings, and off and on enough to keep my interest, black bear sightings. There were many more local reports of sightings from residents, many confirmed over the last 12 months. And most of them were within the area that I have circled in red on this map of Franklin County. And certainly they are in other areas of Franklin County, but where most of the reports have come from have been, especially when it comes to the black bears, the southwest corner of Norwich Township, Upper Arlington area along the Scioto River and the parks there, the O'Shaughnessy Dam area, that northeast corner of Franklin, bordering on Grandview Heights, bordering on Clinton, and likewise in this area, and along where 270 borders between Hilliard and Dublin, bobcats starting to show up occasionally also. It's something that I'm starting to take an interest in tracking based on reports that people are putting in on Nextdoor. It's becoming a pretty reliable place to get these reports from. So that's very interesting that we're starting to see these creatures and that reports are actually being confirmed. People are reporting them to the ODNR, and they are definitely checking out what's being reported to them. So, what did you observe this summer? We'd love to hear it from you. We'd love to find out. And at the end of this presentation, there's going to be some information about our website and how you can send us your information on what you've observed this summer, because we'd love to hear from you. We'd love to find out what you've observed. And if you enjoyed this video, one thing that you can do to make sure that you don't miss a thing is to subscribe to this YouTube channel. We love our subscribers and we appreciate the attention we get from you. We hope that you learn from these videos and enjoy them. If there is something that you would like to see us do a video on, please let us know and we will get it to you. Thank you very much for joining us, and we will see you again soon. I'm Don Kloss for Central Ohio Nature saying Get out there and explore.